When we covered the excommunication of Dr. Stephen and Dr. Heidi Nichols from St. Andrew's Chapel last week, there was one question hanging over the entire story. We knew the charges had never been proven. We knew the Nichols had left the church before the excommunication. We knew the session refused to disclose what those underlying charges even were. The question was, why? Why did a couple who had spent 12 years at the heart of one of the most respected Reformed institutions in America end up indicted, suspended from the Lord's table, and ultimately excommunicated? This week, we got the answer. And it is far more serious than anything we had imagined. The Nicholls have released a public statement. And what they allege about their daughter, about a former youth minister at St. Andrew's Chapel, and about the church's response changes the entire frame of this story. We are going to read their statement in full, and then we are going to talk about what it means. Before we get into the statement, let me make sure you know who we're talking about. Dr. Stephen Nichols, outgoing president of Reformation Bible College, chief academic officer, and teaching fellow at Ligonier Ministries, host of the 5 Minutes in Church History podcast. 12 years of leadership. Considered by many to be one of R.C. Sproul's most trusted successors. Dr. Heidi Nichols, his wife, an adjunct lecturer at Reformation Bible College. Grace Nichols, their daughter. Stephen Adams, former associate pastor and youth minister at St. Andrew's Chapel. He served as Burke Parsons' personal counsel during Parsons' PCA disciplinary trial. He has since resigned from St. Andrew's Chapel, though he continued preaching there as recently as March 15th, 3 days after the Nichols excommunication was made public. Keep those names in mind as we read. Dr. Stephen Nichols posted this statement publicly on his X account. I am going to read it to you in full. Any season of transition can be difficult. The narratives and communications circulating about us on social media over the past few days have made this season even more difficult for us and our family. We want to express our deep gratitude for the 12 years we spent at Reformation Bible College and Ligonier Ministries. We are thankful for that time and for the people we had the privilege to serve. We also appreciate that both RBC and Ligonier have conducted themselves in an amicable, gracious, and honorable manner during this season of transition, and we have sought to do the same. Since others have shared their version of events, we believe it is appropriate to share ours. In January 2024, we learned from the counselor of our daughter, Grace, that he had submitted a report to the Florida Department of Children and Families of suspicion of SA of Grace by Stephen Adams. On January 10, 2025, we reported suspicion of SA of our daughter by Stephen Adams to St. Andrew's Chapel. Over subsequent meetings, we realized that we were at an impasse with our church and that we had different perspectives on how to handle this situation. On April 21, 2025, we notified a pastor at St. Andrew's that we would begin the process of finding a new church. We notified him again on July 20, 2025, that it would be our last Sunday, and it was. We each received separate indictments 2 days later, July 22, 2025. We were accused of slander, unresolved anger, collusion to deceive, failure to follow session directives, and breach of membership vows. There was never a trial, and our case was never adjudicated. After St. Andrew's Chapel voted to disassociate from the PCA on December 14, 2025, we immediately resigned our memberships. On Sunday evening, December 14th, we joined New Hope PCA in Eustis, Florida, by testimony. On January 27, 2026, St. Andrew's found us guilty of contumacy, which is the failure to submit to the authority of the church and refusal to appear before the church. Afterwards, on February 25, 2026, at their request, we met with a committee of the session to answer any questions and hopefully bring some resolution to our differences. On March 10, 2026, St. Andrew's excommunicated us, not on the underlying indictments, but for contumacy. We remain members in good standing at New Hope and are grateful for the love, care, and support of our pastors and our church during this season. We reported suspicion of SA of our daughter, we ended up indicted, and we ended up excommunicated. We are deeply saddened by all that has taken place and grieved for everyone involved. Our prayer and hope is that the central issue will not be lost. At the heart of this issue is the suspected SA of our daughter. Stephen and Heidi Nichols. Read that last line again. We reported suspicion of SA of our daughter, we ended up indicted, and we ended up excommunicated. That is not a theological dispute. That is not a polity disagreement. That is a family saying that they reported what they believed was the SA of their daughter to their church, and the church's response was to indict them. I want to be careful here. These are allegations. The underlying charges against the Nichols were never adjudicated. The accused, Stephen Adams, has denied wrongdoing. We are going to address his response in a moment. But the sequence of events the Nichols describe is a matter of documented public record, and it is damning. Let me lay out the chronology because the sequence matters enormously here. January 2024. The Nichols' daughter Grace is in counseling. Her counselor, a mandated reporter, files a report with the Florida Department of Children and Families, suspecting SA by Stephen Adams. January 10, 2025. The Nichols formally report their suspicion of SA, or of their daughter, to St. Andrew's Chapel. Spring 2025. The session of St. Andrew's Chapel opens disciplinary proceedings, not against Stephen Adams, but against the Nichols. The charges, we now know, included slander, unresolved anger, collusion to deceive, failure to follow session directives, and breach of membership vows. April 21, 2025. Realizing they are at an impasse with the church over how to handle the situation, the Nichols notify a pastor that they intend to find a new church. July 20, 2025. The Nichols notify the church that their last Sunday will be that week. July 22, 2025. 2 days after their last Sunday. 2 days after they leave. The session issues formal indictments against both Stephen and Heidi Nichols. December 14, 2025, St. Andrew's Chapel votes to leave the PCA. The Nichols immediately resign their memberships and join New Hope PCA in Eustis, Florida that same evening. January 27, 2026. St. Andrews finds the Nichols guilty of contumacy for refusing to appear before a church they had already left and resigned their membership from. March 10, 2026. Excommunication. This timeline raises a question the session of St. Andrew's Chapel has not answered. When a family reports suspected abuse of a child, and the church's disciplinary response is directed at the family, not the accused, what does that tell us about priorities? Stephen Adams has not stayed silent. He published a statement on X entitled, "For the Sake of Truth, My Resignation from SAC." In it, Adams claims that the Nichols conducted what he described as a prolonged campaign of harassment and slander against him over 2 years. He wrote, "Think of the worst things someone in my position could be accused of. Yes, that is what it was." He claims there were troubling text messages sent at odd hours of the night, a public confrontation with a family member, and anonymous social media messages to his friends throughout 2024, including messages wishing death upon him. He says he filed a police report against the Nichols in January 2025. I want to be fair to Adams here. If what he describes is true, if the Nichols conducted a harassment campaign against him, that would be serious, and it would need to be addressed. But here is what a number of observers have noted. Adams's statement is 1,200 words long, and it does not actually specify what was done to him. He asserts slander, harassment, and stalking. He claims to have emails, texts, Instagram messages, and video evidence. He does not present any of it. As the evangelical dark web put it, Adams went public without actually making anything known to the public. And then there is Bob Mattis, a PCA elder who represented the Nichols in ecclesiastical court while they were still at St. Andrews and while the church was still in the PCA. He responded directly to Adams on X. "It's you who have slandered and harassed the Nichols and likely motivated Ligonier to part ways with them." That is a sitting PCA elder making a direct counter-accusation against Adams. This matters, so let's be clear about who Stephen Adams is in this story. Adams served as associate pastor and youth minister at St. Andrew's Chapel. He was described by former church members as a, and I'm quoting here, mini Burke Parsons. He served as Burke Parsons' personal counsel during the PCA trial, in which Parsons was found guilty of domineering and harsh leadership. According to reporting by the Roy's Report, Adams was investigated by a PCA committee in Central Florida for allegations of inappropriate and abusi conduct with minors. That investigation did not result in charges, but it did take place. Adams subsequently resigned from St. Andrew's Chapel. The church elders told the congregation they were sad to see him leave, but that he has a tremendous opportunity to pursue a leadership position in his family's business. Despite his resignation, Adams continued to preach at St. Andrew's. Church bulletins show him preaching on March 15th in 2026, 3 days after the Nichols excommunication letter was made public. Let me say clearly what this story now is and what it is not. This is not primarily a story about Presbyterian polity. It is not primarily a story about contumacy or church membership or the marks of the true church. Those questions matter, and they have their place. But they are not the heart of this. The heart of this is a family who says they reported the suspected SA of their daughter, and the institution they trusted responded by indicting them. We do not know the full truth of what happened between the Nichols and Stephen Adams. We may never know unless legal proceedings or further documentation brings clarity. Adams denies the accusations. The DCF report has not been made public, and no criminal charges have been filed. What we do know is this. A mandated reporter, a professional counselor, filed a report with the Florida Department of Children and Families. That is not nothing. Mandated reporters are required by law to report reasonable suspicion. That report was filed in 2024. The Nicholls then brought that report to their church in January 2025. And within months, they were the ones under indictment. The session of St. Andrew's Chapel has still not disclosed the charges against the Nicholls publicly. They have still not addressed the underlying SA allegation. And the man at the center of the accusation, who has since resigned, continued to preach from that pulpit days after the excommunication became public. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. If you have been watching this channel for any amount of time, you know that we cover these stories because accountability matters. Because institutions, even reformed ones, even flagship ones, are capable of failing the people they are supposed to protect, especially when those institutions operate without external oversight. St. Andrew's Chapel is now independent. There is no denomination, no presbytery, no external court to which victims, families, or members can appeal. The session answers to no one but itself. And right now, that matters very much. Drop a comment below. Pray for Grace Nichols. Pray for everyone involved in this situation. And subscribe if you haven't already. More to come.